Conversations across time, 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 conversations across.
Good evening. Welcome once again to Conversations Across Time. This is the third in a series that we are calling Fish Rots from the Head. And our panel that has come back for the third week in a row is journalist, muckraker, and person who is responsible for us having safe food. It's a big deal to me, is Mr. Upton Sinclair.
You like to eat,
I like to eat.
I hope your food continues to be safe with what's going on now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to be back.
And seated next to Mr. Sinclair is the 29th President of the United States, viewed by many as having been in charge of the worst administration in this country's history until...
He's got stiff competition
Not
now.
competition, he's been unseated.
Yes.
He has
Oh,
been
yeah.
unseated
Yes.
He's been
by Donald
surpassed.
J. Trump. You have been surpassed. But welcome, President Harding.
Great to be here. I mean, that's one dubious honor I can do without, I'll tell you.
And seated to my left is my co-host, Babette Joseph. Babby, welcome back.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Have you enjoyed this discussion
Oh,
about
yeah.
Donald Trump and whether or not he's a Russian agent?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it feels-
I'm convinced.
Yeah, it feels good to me that I'm no longer the worst president we ever had.
I know, I'm sure. I want to go through a
There's
list.
a lot of presidents who probably are in your, because this
Oh,
is
goody.
the worst. This is the worst.
So,
Oh, goody.
the first week we talked about the articles in the New York Times and the Washington Post and what the revelations, and just to cover it briefly, New York Times blockbuster story on January 12th, 2019, reported that there's a counterintelligence, or there was a counterintelligence investigation launched by the FBI to determine whether or not President Donald Trump is a Russian agent or a Russian asset. On the following day,
That's so,
the following
so
day,
upsetting.
it's upsetting
So
that question is
upsetting.
even being asked.
Nobody should.
And the following
What
day,
happened to this country that we're asking that question about our president?
If you wrote a movie script,
yes,
right?
They'd say it's too fantastic.
They would turn it down, and a couple of my books have been made into motion pictures, but they would turn it down, saying no, you could
This could
never
never
have the FBI investigating
A
the
sitting
president of the
president.
United States. They said that's too inconceivable. We can't put it on the screen.
Well, that's what you get for getting businessmen in government. I mean, you get businessmen, government businessmen are out for business. I mean, they want to make money.
Men.
And that's, businessmen. They're all about money. They want to make money, and they don't give a damn how they get it.
But it really doesn't matter, in my opinion, in investigating, it doesn't matter if the man in charge is a businessman. The corporate world controls the political world in our country now.
That's right. Like Coolidge said, the business of America is business. We worship the businessman. We idolize the businessman. We hold the businessman as the model for every damn thing that's good in this country. And working with him, having him in my government, is not so.
I think there's another element of this, that people don't participate in public life. They don't think that it's worth their time. They don't think they can make a change. People don't even vote. We are a democracy, supposedly, in which the vast majority of eligible people do not vote. They
But
do not vote.
The question, and the question is, first of all, there's been voter suppression, and I've investigated most of that. So the corporate...
They're working on making it worse, of
Right,
course.
and
We're digging our hole and they're
it
helping.
becomes a self-fulfilling thing,
Yes.
because if you see your vote doesn't matter, and
Then
you
you
see
don't come out the next
exactly,
time.
Exactly. So how do you, the question is, and I see, at least in some of your last election, I see some possibility for change, because you did get a lot more participation from people
And
that
it's a
normally
very
don't.
diverse.
Yes.
Very diverse.
Yes.
And that's, I think, I mean, that's what us as progressives back in the day fought for, but you need to get more of that, and that's the only thing that's going to change.
You need to be on the street, and you need to be getting people registered to vote, and you need to inspire them.
So
yeah, I gotta warn you.
Barack Obama inspired people.
Yeah, but I gotta warn you. If they see that progressive people, like you talked about, are getting elected, I mean, the corporations and the politicians that in their
Absolutely.
pocket, they're gonna find some other way to stay in power.
Okay,
Maybe even a military
but
coup
we'll
like in
find
Chile.
another way to get them out.
let me just do this. I want to go through just so that we can
Yeah.
just tie the audience into this. I want to list some cabinet members and administration officials of the Trump administration who have resigned. James Mattis, Secretary of Defense. We talked about that a little bit last week, but I think we should revisit that because we know that's tied into Syria and his objection as to what the president's decision was about Syria.
Well, the president worships strongmen.
Of course.
Yes.
So naturally, and we can talk about Syria. Ryan Zinke, Secretary of the Interior, resigned. Ryan Zinke, someone from the oil industry. John Kelly, Chief of Staff, resigned. Jeff Sessions, Attorney General, resigned. And
Who
we know
gave
what-
up an elected position
Gave
to,
up.
But
to
he was,
end up
he was
resigning.
forced to resign.
He
I
was-
mean,
he was-
there's two kind of resignations. There's, I
Yes.
want to get out and get out
Exactly.
before I fire you.
Yes, and to that point, with the Secretary of Interior, get out before you're indicted.
Right.
There's also
Yes.
that element. Let's see. Nikki Haley, she was the ambassador to the UN, but that was a cabinet level position. She resigned, but I think she resigned because she could see the writing on the wall. If she wanted to have a future as a politician, she needed to get out.
Not a stupid woman.
Not a stupid woman. Don McGahn, who was White House counsel, well, as an attorney,
It's
we
the
know what
worst.
it's like when you
It's
have a
the
client
worst.
that doesn't listen to you. Scott Pruitt, director of the Environmental Protection Agency, who also didn't think that that agency should exist. Let's see, Kelly Sadler, communications aide, was fired. Tom Bossert from Homeland Security resigned, and we know what's in his place now. The replacement, and this is a woman that is totally out of her element. H.R. McMaster, National Security Advisor, resigns. David Shulkin, Director of Veteran Affairs, fired. Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, we talked about him at last week's show. He was from the oil industry, and he described or referred to Donald Trump as a blank moron. Then let's see, Tom Price.
Put in your own word for blank.
Put in your own word. Tom Price, Secretary of Health and Human Services. That's a resign before indictment, I believe.
Another one, yes.
Another one resigned before indictment. Anthony Scaramucci, who served.
Oh, my.
He didn't even serve a full day.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, well, okay.
They serve a whole damn week.
Now he has a cable TV show.
Yes,
And a
yes.
book out.
Yep.
Ron Priebus, who was the chief of staff, and of course he came from the Republican Party establishment. There was no way he was going to get along with Trump.
The thing is, though, that the replacements, other than a couple of them are acting, are just as corrupt, or
Oh,
will
that's
be
worse.
just as corrupt as they are.
And many times they're worse.
Right. So
They're more blatant about it.
this-
It's more
the
visible.
the stench of the head is getting worse,
Yes.
and the swamp is getting deeper.
And
Well-
the tail is beginning to rot.
Well, trust me, these guys that were in, they got their fortune. They got out. This crew's gonna get their fortune. They're gonna get
Well, wait
out.
a minute. Now you've
It's,
got some that resigned on a different. James Comey was fired.
Right, he was
and
fired.
he was fired because what?
Because he tried to do his job.
He
It
was doing his
it
job.
ties right in with the New York Times article and why
Exactly.
he's being investigated. And he went right on television and said why he fired him. Because he was, I can't even say how your president say it, Russia.
Russia.
Russia, yeah.
Russia. Yes.
So that's why he was fired. He said
R-U-S-S-E-R.
it, and The Times article has, he wanted a memo before that, blame it that he fired him with Russia, and McCann, who later got fired himself, said you can't put that in.
Don't put that in it. Don't put that in it. But he saved the draft.
Right.
Saved the draft of that letter.
I gotta tell you, there's a big difference from with Comey and the FBI. I mean, a hell of a lot different from my day. Harry used the Bureau of Investigation. That's what it was called before.
That was the predecessor,
FBI.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, use it as his own enforcers. I mean, he hired Billy Burns, Burns, who headed the Burns Detective Agency,
Yes.
as director of the Bureau.
But
he used it as his own personal muscle.
But President Harding, that's exactly the danger that we're facing now, and that's exactly what President Trump wants to do with the DOJ, and
That's right.
make it his own private investigating and intimidate people.
His own personal secret police.
Exactly, and that's exactly what he wants to go back to.
And you should add that the man that the nominee to as the nominee William Barr, William Barr believes in a particular philosophy as regards executive authority, and that is that the supreme command of the law in this nation is not the Attorney General, it is the President.
Right.
It's actually,
the
I
Department
think,
of
the Supreme Court, but that's
No, but please, that's a reasonable decision.
But they believe it's called the unitary president.
That's right.
And that's what
You call it, or they call it the unitary
Go
president.
ahead.
I call it a tyrant.
Right, that's what it
But
is.
that's what it
Yeah,
is.
that's what it is.
That's what it is.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
Exactly.
Well, you're calling it exactly what it is. But now you've got Mike Barr, who is now the nominee to be Attorney General, and Mike Barr believes in this philosophy. He believes that he is not as.
Well, that's why he got chosen among
Well,
other
I think not.
people.
Yeah,
And
he applied for the job.
Well,
the guy that was just appointed to the Supreme Court,
Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh believes in the same thing.
Same thing.
So that's the scary thing.
That's very scary.
Yep.
And
the Supreme Court's going to give up its power to the executive.
But that's what they
Dangerous.
believe, and that's an autocracy. Now, the one last person I want to mention is Mike Flynn, National Security Advisor. Another person that resigned. So now, this is a list of when Hillary Clinton talked about a basket of deplorables.
They all belong in jail. There is not one person
the exception
there.
of James Comey, Ron Priebus, and Rex Tillerson, maybe, and Nikki Haley, and James Mattis.
Right,
Everyone else, there is a cloud over them that is, it's a stain on them. It's a stench.
yeah,
It's
but
the
the
stench.
stench is still there because look who's still left.
Yeah, look at who's left. Look at who's left.
You
And
still and the replacements are just as bad. And you have Betsy DeVos in Department of
goodness.
Education that wants to destroy public education
Yes.
and give money. And we're going back to the capitalists to
She's an
private for-profit schools.
Yes.
She's an anti-intellectual, and she's our education person.
Oh, here's another fun fact about Ms. DeVos. Her brother is Eric Prince, who's
Yes.
who runs this like a private army, Blackwater. That's what it is, a private
Yeah.
army for rent.
Which, by the way, President Harding, you'll find it interesting
yeah.
that there's so much scandal around the Trump administration that you forget things. But do you recall that at one point, President Trump wanted Blackwater. He wanted to replace the Secret Service with Blackwater.
Oh man.
And it also should be noted
You
that
don't remember that? No.
that,
Yes.
that the Price family and
doesn't
the
surprise
DeVos
me.
family are the biggest single campaign contributors to the Republican Party in the state of Michigan.
Really?
So
Okay.
Which family, say again?
the Price and the
Price.
DeVos family. I think Price got his money from that multi-levels, what do you call it, Amway or something. I think that's.
No, that was the
That
that
was
the
DeVos?
DeVos family.
Okay.
I mean, they
Amway.
run the Amway. That's how they got the
They're
fortune.
running the country as if it's
well, that's
Amway.
That's exactly right.
You're right.
Right.
You're right.
And
Everybody gets their piece of the action,
and
supposedly.
if Trump pardons Bernie
Except for the consumers who get cheated.
if
They don't care about him.
Trump pardons Bernie Bernie from the Ponzi scheme. He'll
Yes.
make him Secretary of
Madoff.
Treasury.
Bernie Madoff.
Oh, yeah.
He'll make him Secretary of the Treasury.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
But put him in charge of the stock market.
Right, exactly. Well,
You
believe it or
forgot-
not, Joe Kennedy, because I investigated this, President Roosevelt put Joe Kennedy in charge of the SEC at one time.
That's right. That's right. He absolutely did.
Nobody said all these people were perfect. They were just a hell of a lot better.
Well,
No, I think it's really
Kind of
true.
relative anymore.
Well,
Who's
but
more
we've
corrupt? Who's less corrupt than the next guy? I
But
mean,
we've
that's the standard we
also-
got anymore.
expanded the role of president, which all of us have been watching for many years, and in the back of my mind always was, what happens if we get the wrong kind of president? Now we know part of what can happen.
The guys, the founding fathers who wrote the Constitution anticipated that, and they thought it would happen much earlier. They were worried about that.
Of course they were worried. They
I think
left, they just
I think
rebelled
that
against
Nancy
the king.
Pelosi made a really good statement. She said the reason Article 1 is the legislative branch and Article 2 is the executive branch is because that's how the founders thought the country should be run, not the other way around.
But I think what's happened now is that communications being so instantaneous that a deliberative body is always at a disadvantage against one person with
who controls the
huge
media.
power.
Well, one of the things I did is in my early year, my middle years anyway, is to deal with the ethics of the press because we were writing during the Spanish-American War and William Randolph Hearst, and yellow journalism got us into the war. And I see similarities now between the yellow journalism and the rag sheet newspapers and Fox News and things like the National Enquirer and things like that, where they use their platform for political reasons and don't report the news. And the president turned on Fox News and he saw the Fox News and Laura Ingraham and he listened to the radio with Rush Limbaugh, and they're saying if you do Limbaugh, and he changed his mind.
Yes.
He changed his mind because of what we will call a yellow journalistic press. No basis in fact, no basis in anything.
No inquiry about what the voters might think.
Right.
No mind of his own.
Not interested.
Right.
I mean,
so that's what your yellow journalism is. That's what I railed against, and that's one of the other big dangers that I see facing your country now is that you have news networks that put out false news. He talks about fake news from the legitimate press, but there's more fake news coming out of the bubble press, and it shouldn't be fake news anywhere. I mean,
Right.
Well, do you think when you look back at, when you talk about Fox and you look back at how early there were indications that there were problems at Fox, and dare I bring up Bush v. Gore? Dare I bring that up? I mean, Fox News was, of course, they proclaimed the election for W, and that was it. And there was no recount. They had the Chads and whatever, but I'm just saying Fox News was all the way back in the year 2000. We were having this problem with Fox News.
And his number one press advisor, now the head of his whole press operation, comes from Fox News.
Bill Shine comes from Fox News.
So I railed against that because we got involved in the Spanish-American War because of the desire on the part of certain political figures who used the Hearst press and the Pulitzer press to rally the people to fight against Spain. And there was no real reason, and even the sinking of the ship that supposedly was the Maine, that was the spark to the war, is controversial if that really happened the way it happened. And it's the same thing Fox News is doing now, and that's the other scary thing that's going on now, that the power that Fox News and other cable outlets and radio outlets have over our political process, and
These
how much
right-wing
influence they
pundits.
have over this president who supposedly doesn't read, and I don't even know if he can read, so he gets all his information from a biased news network,
Yes.
and that's scary.
It's like he doesn't have a mind of his own. I mean, these commentators, these pundits,
Well, they
tell
used
what
to, they
to
used to
think.
accuse you of the same thing of being an empty suit.
Yeah.
But President
That
Harding,
reminds
how
me,
do you,
yeah.
how do you react to the fact that the National Enquirer, which is another rag, National Enquirer had a policy of purchasing stories to bury. I mean, this is, and hopefully we're going to find out what's in the National Enquirer safe, but they've got a lot of receipts having to do with Donald Trump.
And people believe that stuff, and here's the thing. People don't, the average person doesn't buy the New York Times. But the average person reads the National Enquirer when they're going through the supermarket
That's right.
aisle.
They read the headlines.
They read
and
the
they pick 'em
headline.
up.
Yeah, that's a problem. Some people don't think for themselves.
Well, come on.
And look
now.
at what
I
we
mean,
got in the White House.
People are very busy. People are scared.
Yes.
People are scared. What do you expect?
But you
they
can't-
don't know
you-
what to do.
you
They
can't have-
voted, and
That's
nothing
okay.
changed.
I have no problem as a journalist with whatever they read. But you can't have the politicians controlling what goes into
Yes.
the press. You
right.
can't have the National Enquirer doing Trump's bidding to avoid any type of scandal.
We don't have a democratic republic if the press is suppressed.
Right,
And
There's
that's
the
the
end of
danger.
it.
And that's the danger. That's the danger.
And
that
we're
Mr. Sinclair
part
is
of that
speaking
press,
to.
too.
But
We
Yes.
should remember that.
But that's the danger that he's addressing, and that is why it becomes so scary, because
Yes.
you've got these popular and these rag sheets, and you're exactly right. People in the grocery line, and they are reading these headlines, and they pick it up and they read these salacious stories and believe
your
it
president
to be true.
uses it.
Yes.
They
Of course.
killed stories about him. He put that, and whatever he told Shine to put in there, he put in there. Put a story in about Cruz's father being involved in the JFK assassination, which is absurd. But they put it in the press, and then he cites it. Then he
Yes,
cites it.
because it's in the press.
People
Because
will
it's in
be
the press.
gullible. Don't worry. That's how a lot of politicians like
But
their
you can't
voters gullible. They'll
have.
believe anything they'll
You
tell
can't have. And everybody did it. Joe Kennedy planted stories, through his friends, and they bribe. But you have, and that's one of the things I really worked against. And the press has to be blinded to the political.
Absolutely.
They are,
Must
trust
be
me.
independent. But I want to
But
ask.
you can't have see, there's two problems I see
Yes.
as a journalist that happen. One is, it used to be the press, especially on TV, but even in the newspapers, was independent from profit. So they didn't care what the ratings were or anything else. Now they do, so
Yeah.
it's a profit thing.
Yeah.
So that's really important.
That's a big problem.
That's a very, very, very,
Serious
very,
problem.
very big problem. That it's for, and the other thing was the Fairness Act that was changed by President Reagan. It used to be that if you were in the media, and I were running for political office, or you, President Harding, running for, and you spoke for 20 minutes, they would have to give the opposition a free 20 minutes. If they gave you free 20 minutes, now they do it. They don't do it at all. Once in a while, like your President Trump made a speech the other day about the wall for 9 minutes. So they gave Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, time afterwards. But during the campaign, they would have Trump on 5, 6, 7, 8 times a week, and they would not have Hillary Clinton at all. So those two things, to me, are the two things that really, really have hurt the press in terms of the political environment.
So the Fairness Act, the Press Fairness Act.
Right,
is
that was
a big problem.
changed by real bad.
Yes.
Because either you wouldn't go on, or you'd have to give equal time to your opposition.
Well, and one of the things
Seems fair to me.
that
Well, that's why they called it the Fairness Act.
one of the things that Trump liked to brag about is that he was great for ratings. See, he knew how to manipulate the media, that he was great for ratings.
Yeah, he did.
And there were some shows.
Well, that's
that
what he does.
He
would-
just
he-
made, but
no.
the speech he just made on the wall, his ratings were lower than Nancy
Yes,
and
finally.
Schumer's.
Finally,
Yes.
the American public, I don't think that we are stupid. I really don't. I think we're forgiving and absent-minded. But after a while, that stops, I hope.
Well, let me ask this. So where are we? How do we, from our positions, what do we ask for? What do we ask our audience to do? I mean,
Well,
but I
Beth
know
says it all the time.
Vote, yes. But we need
Participate.
participation. That's a thing that.
Well, that's the bottom line of it, but
Yes.
people
That's the
should
last
do more.
thing. That's the last thing machines want. Trust me, machines don't want political machines like I worked with. Don't want the public getting too deep in it. Just vote here's your money, pay the party line, goodbye.
But
Don't bother us for
I
another
want to
year.
say something to you.
Yeah.
I am heartened by the the 2018 midterm elections.
Yes.
That is something that has given me pause.
People are coming out.
People are coming out, and when I look at the newly elected House of Representatives, and I see all of those, the diversity that is included in that group.
And energetic.
Yes, and so I think we've got to change.
Fearless.
I think
They're fearless.
Yes, and so those folk that get upset with the Congresswoman from
Ocasio.
the Congresswoman from Michigan,
Yeah.
who made that statement in a setting, and they said
She said a bad word?
She said a very bad word, and I
Oh,
want to ask
please,
you
I
a
heard
question.
worse. I've said worse.
You've heard worse, but let me
say
ask
worse 25 times a minute.
let me ask you this. How many people are offended by the term that she used, or more offended by the term that she used in terms of mother, which, as we know, refers to a very small segment of the population, and that would be those people that have leanings towards
Perversions of various kinds.
Let's say Oedipus.
Okay.
Let's just say they have an Oedipus issue. Okay, so that statement that she made pertains to just a very, very small group of people. But the statement that Donald Trump made as a candidate, the candidate Trump made about what you could do to women and grabbing them by 50% of the population has those things that he wants to grab them by. I'm just saying that when you look at the
he's
number
much
of
worse.
people that are impacted, I think that this Congresswoman Tlaib, her statement in referring to let's get rid of the MFer, that's a lot.
I applauded that. I thought,
Yes.
finally, somebody called him the right name.
Well, maybe he would do that to his mother. I mean, you see how he looks. Look
doesn't
how he does to his
mean
daughter.
that.
Look at how he lusts after his daughter.
Yeah, I mean,
It doesn't mean that. It just
doesn't-
means
it
you're
really
a
doesn't.
thoroughly horrible person.
But the point of it is,
I wouldn't put it past him.
But
there was no. This man was
neither.
elected
either
president
you have
after-
to be appalled at what she said and what he said, or it's okay either way, but you can't have, as the evangelicals or the Republicans, justify its only locker room talk for what he said and then chastise her.
Yeah, you gotta watch these church-going folks. They're not so pure.
Well,
I work with them.
God
I
knows.
just wonder,
God
she got to
knows.
end the show
Amen.
because I think we're running out of time.
We are
but-
running out of
Yes.
time, but
But I just wonder what would have happened if she wasn't a female Muslim.
there you go.
I
There
thought you were going to say, we
Or-
wondered what would happen if Hillary had been a man.
Well,
That's-
listen.
That's for another show.
That's for another show. We'll leave it there. But I thank you so much, Mr. Sinclair, President
be.
Harding. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Babette and I are eternally grateful for you coming to chat with us about this. And guess what? We are certainly going to run that show that we did about Trump being the Manchurian candidate. I think that that's appropriate that we rerun that show because 3 years ago at Conversations Across Time, we were questioning his allegiance.
We were good. We
Yes.
predicted.
So once again, this has been Conversations Across Time. Thank you so much for joining us, and join us next week for another exciting conversation across time. Good night.
Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across